Just talking musicals with you.
Who is your favourite artist of all time, yesterday and today?
Today is a bit of a struggle. I've got a couple in mind, but certainly in the past there are several. But the one that comes right at the top is Danny Kaye, probably the most complete performer of all time. He sang, he did comedy brilliantly. His word songs were a great inspiration to me, to those word songs I've created for the London Palladium each year in the pantomime. And when I first thought of doing one, I looked straight away to Danny Kaye to see how he did it, try and break down how he managed to remember all those things, and develop my own technique from that. But he absolutely, I mean, The Court Jester is one of my favourite movies of all time. It's fantastic. But they all sang and danced back in those days. All the stars did anyway. In theatre, you were either a singer or a dancer back then. Nobody crossed over except if you were Sid Charisse. No, Sid Charisse didn't sing that much, did she? Fred Astaire, Gene Kelly. They were rare, people who could sing and dance, because that was what the studio wanted. They want everybody to learn all of the skills. Frank Sinatra, fantastic dancer, and yet we don't think of him as a dancer. We see him in those early movies, and that's exactly what he did. But modern performers, it's really strange, and I don't know why I'm struggling with this. And I think one of the reasons is because of the way shows are put on these days, there's no star. There's no star names anymore in musical. There is within our industry. We know who's good and who's the best within our, but they're not made stars. I think this brings me back to what I was saying earlier on about, because they're not being put on television. Nobody knows who they are. I think we've got probably Michael Ball, Elaine Page, and they're people who've been doing this for 30, 40 years, Yeah. But you start to think of people who are certainly respected and loved and regarded as a star within our industry, but outside of the industry, nobody really knows them enough to want to go and see them in a show, unless you're a fan. I know that Charlie Stemp has a big following, but not enough for him to do a show and fill it week in, week out. Nobody can these days. So it's quite. The point I'm making is that we're not encouraged to behave to. Hang on, maybe I'll do it this way. Musical theatre, very often, and not always, but very often, it's dictated to the performers rather than the performers having an incredible creative input. I was listening to the radio only this morning. Somebody was talking about songs that are created. They used to create them for the singer. They were talking about Judy Garland and Somewhere Over a Rainbow. They were considering her voice, her persona, the public perception of her. All of this went into creating Somewhere Over a Rainbow. They wanted it to be in her register. They wanted it to show off all the good things in her voice, not just musically, but lyrically. They wanted it to sit perfectly, and it did.
Well, I kind of started talking about her earlier, but my yesterday musicals artist is Doris Day. Doris Day inspired me so much as a young thing, wanting to do what I do. The first part I ever played in our local amateur society was Calamity Jane. I was 14 at the time, and I was a 14-year-old in a group of 50-year-old women all dressed in gingham, and there's me, jazzy 14-year-old, loving my life. And that was the first part I ever played. And so I was just obsessed with watching her in all her movies. She did so many movies. And I think she's just perfect. I think she's beautiful, and her tone of her voice is incredible, but her acting and her comedic talent is fantastic. And I think if you come and watch me in a show, you will probably recognize a lot of the faces that I pull, because I think that's just leached and stolen from Doris Day, for sure.
It's an imprint, isn't it? It's something that you love. And
yeah. And I kind of learned through her, so I used to sing along with her. And so maybe my tone's a bit similar, or if I sing a song that she sung, then maybe I'd sound a bit like her. But because she was my idol at the time, yeah, she's my ultimate yesteryear. I mean, I love Judy Garland. I love lots and lots of old musical stars, but Doris is the best.
She bears the crown. And what about today? That's a tricky one, isn't it?
It's really hard because there are so many, a million pals and acquaintances that I just adore. Like Betty Buckley is just, she's just a goddess. She is just the master at acting through a song. She's just incredible. But for me, I think vocally especially, but she's also an incredible actress, is Audra McDonald.
Oh gosh, yes.
Audra McDonald is just one of those people that can sing everything. She does a beautiful mixy belt, and her soprano is sublime, and she's someone that champions being able to do everything, and her voice is like velvet and butter, and I could just listen to her forever. I think, I mean, I was just listening to her the other day actually of singing My Daddy's Son from Ragtime. Oh my God. It's just, she's guttural. You can hear that performance through that. I mean, there's lots of beautiful voices out there and her voice is beautiful, but you hear that emotion and that performance through that track in my phone when I was walking around the woods the other day. And you're like, oh my God, just crying because you can just hear it. It's just incredible. I think she's amazing. I love her.
I have to tell you, I went to see her. I was, a few years ago when she was doing Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill in New York.
Good to see it.
I sat there, it was a matinee, and the set was fantastic. So you were sort of amongst it because
yeah.
Did you see it? Because it came to London.
No. But I was doing the workshop of Bonnie and Clyde at the time, and Will Blum, our director, was the associate director on that, on Lady Day, and I was offered free tickets to go and see it, and I couldn't go and see it. And so I was absolutely gutted because she's like my idol. I've heard nothing but she's just incredible. I've seen bits on the telly, but
I wasn't expecting that because knowing she's a soprano and her voice was absolutely Billie Holiday. It was just extraordinary. So she had the speaking voice and the singing voice off pat. You know when sometimes you watch something on television and you forget that you're watching somebody playing something? Michael Sheen does it, all the time, doesn't he?
Yes.
Yeah. And which is funny because we're doing this on Zoom and staged. But the kind of thing where he just sort of is a chameleon, and that's what she does in that. And I just sat there and cried because I just was totally lost in her story, and it's obviously so tragic. And it was the middle of the afternoon, and people just sat there in the audience at the end, gobsmacked, because you just felt like you'd seen Billie Holiday.
Yeah, I think she's wonderful. I think she's wonderful, and I think she's an exceptional actress and performer. And she's won 6 Tony Awards, so you kind of like, she knows her onions.
Yeah.
So she is. I would, if I ever came across her in my life, I would probably be extremely starstruck and probably not be able to speak, or probably cry in her face. But
she's probably used to that, though.
Probably.
Julie Andrews is always the top of the list. There's nobody better than Julie Andrews ever. Nathan Lane, Maggie Smith, they're all the top in my book. People from the past, I think the question was originally phrased as people with us and no longer with us. Mike Nichols, who's not a performer, but a brilliant director who founded so many careers. Merman, of course, you can't leave Merman out of it. And Roger Reitz and Elaine Stritch.
Oh, Elaine Stritch.
Terrific. We went to the same foot doctor. And she came to see Nathan quite often. Yeah, and she was a character. She's a terrific person. And all the stories are interesting.
She's force of life, wasn't she? So strong.
Yes. She used to go to the box office and say, "I'm Elaine Stritch, give me a ticket." And they always did.
So she didn't.
Yeah, any show. No, would just go the day of and say, "I want a ticket." Of course, they always gave it to her.
How naughty.
Yeah. She was who she was. She got away with it.
Yeah, well, you can't blame her. And I suppose,
No.
yeah. How lovely.
She was into, yes. When there was a theater community, when there were people who were really ingrained in it all the time, she was one of them. I don't know that we have that.
Do you not think we have that still?
I don't. I think Nathan was the last one. Because it's just so hard to make, you know. The productions are, if they run, they go beyond one person's energy. But, you know, it's always, even Rosalind Russell couldn't believe that anybody else would ever play Auntie Mame but her. She wanted the show to close when she left. But when you've got a brilliant show that's been infused with a terrific talent, it should go on. But people become identified with roles, and we're glad they create what they do, give to it everything they have. So
going back to Max Bialystock, because I can't resist going back to Max Bialystock.
Sure, I know all the answers.
What an exhausting role that is, because it's just, I mean, Corey, who I've got to explain for anybody that hasn't seen the Corey English interview, he's talked about how exhausting it is, and he's played that role on tour and Drury Lane. But I didn't really think about it until he said how full-on physical it is. You've got to really be on it, haven't you?
Yes, it takes a lot of energy. Do you know the story about Ethel Merman and Gypsy? Another tour de force, but she specified in her contract that when they built the show, she should have a 10-minute rest in the first act and a 15-minute rest in the second act, so she could pull herself together. So in the first act, it's Little Lamb, and in the second act, it's the Three Strippers.
Okay.
That was Ethel Merman's structured opportunity to rest so that she could go out and do Mama's Turn. Now, with producers, Nathan asked to have that whole recap of the show put in at the end when he's in the jail cell, and he regretted it a couple of times because you're tired by then, and then you're doing the whole show by yourself. But he had the stamina, and he did it, and I said to him after that, you've got to make sure, and not that he's listening to me, he's not listening to me, he doesn't need my advice at all, but anytime you can build in a rest for yourself, maybe you should do that. But when Nathan's energy leaves the show, the stage sort of dies. So that's how much he puts out.
You've clearly built up to have worked together for so long, this amazing relationship. It must be like an accompanist with a singer. An accompanist, I've studied singing, and I know that my accompanist always knew when I was going to go wrong before I knew I was going to go wrong. And I think that's how I feel like you must be when you're working with somebody direct, that you know what they're going to want before they know what they want it.
That's what Helen Mirren said in Gosford Park, isn't it? That's what a good servant is. You have to know what they want before they know they want it, and have it in your hand.
Just talking musicals with you.